Hey you guys, welcome back to Reserved Investments. So for those of you that are unaware, the year 2022 was a record-breaking year for the antiques and collectibles trade by and large. We had massive record-breaking sales take place in almost every single top-tier collecting category across the board. Normally, this is something that's usually only reserved for a few top-tier collecting categories along with the high-end art market. In 2022, records were broken. Pop culture collectibles, traditional antiques, mainstay collectibles, coins, currency, comic books, sports cards, they almost all unanimously broke new ground. And honestly, heading into 2023, the hype is still on. Now, to be fair, there has been a pullback in certain collecting categories. I'm sure that you guys are aware of this, especially if you're in the pop culture markets. If we look at comic books have been falling anywhere from 10 all the way up in certain instances to 30%. Now, is that a bad thing? No, I've long argued on this channel during the pandemic, a little bit before the pandemic, and even a little bit after the pandemic, that market was pretty much overheated, that there needed to be a pullback in that market. And it looks like we are getting a healthy pullback in that market. Now, if we want to talk about graded video games, that market pretty much crashed. And the reason why it crashed is it wasn't composed of organic demand. It was artificial demand that was pretty much put there by the market manipulators. Certain grading companies, certain auction companies got involved in that market, and the result is, if you attempted to speculate or invest in that market, in most cases, you are down significantly across the board, especially if you went after vintage factory sealed Nintendo games and the like, which I, Sean of Reserved Investments, told you to use caution with. Some of you did not listen to me. Now you're paying the price. Other experts in the trade also cautioned against this, mainly Harry Rinker, who is one of the top tier experts in the entire antiques and collectibles trade, and even Pat the NES Punk, Carl Jopes, other people gave their opinion, including, I got to give him credit, Rudy with Alpha Investments, who basically is in the market for collectible card games. He told you guys, the market's frothy. The market's going to pop and it's not going to come back. He mentioned it in several videos now. So this is something that we really have to focus on. What's happening in the overall antiques and collectibles trade? Because if we listen to Barron's, the investment paper Barron's, I am linking an article that they wrote in the video description below that is pretty much entitled, Heritage Auctions Achieves $1.45 billion in record year for collectibles. And this was published on December 29th, 2022. And yes, they are talking about the year 2022 in this article. So let's just look at this from another perspective, guys. Just one major auction house. Heritage Auctions alone almost scored $1.5 billion in sales last year. Now, again, you can read this article for yourself. This article will go into depth and tell you what records were broken, what items sold for the high point. Now, there is one thing that I got to warn some of my viewers about. You're going to probably see a lot of articles about this going forward, possibly over the next week, possibly over the next 2 weeks. If there's even more record-breaking sales in 2023, the media is going to report on it. From the financial media all the way down to ABC News, 6ABC, CBS News, NBC, all the local stations, sometimes they will report record-breaking sales in the antiques and collectibles trade. And this is where I get a ton of emails. People find the articles that I write through Antiques and Auction News, or they reach out to me through my consulting service that's devoted to antiques and collectibles. And they say, Sean, I'm seeing all these record-breaking sales. I want to get in on the action. And I have to tell them, keep in mind, a lot of this is hype. Yes, people are paying a phenomenal price for some of these collectibles. But if you look at what's selling, what is selling the most is top-tier investment-grade items that are going to cost you a pretty penny if you want to buy them. Let's be realistic. I mean, even if you tell me, Sean, I want an Incredible Hulk 181 and CGC 9.4 or above right now. Well, you're talking 5 figures. And it goes up from there. Meaning if you want like an Action Comics 1 or Detective Comics 27, let's be realistic, even in low grade, that's pretty much out of most individuals' price range. So you really have to be careful because when we hear record-breaking amounts being paid, it's usually for investment-grade antiques and collectibles. If you don't know by now what an investment-grade antique or collectible is, it's commonly defined as the top 15% of the market. And some connoisseurs would argue it's the top 10% of the market. I give a little more leeway than that. My definition is the top 15% of the trade for grade, condition, and value-wise is always going to be your investor's playground. That's where people like to park their money if they're attempting to invest long-term in these markets. So it's going to be very interesting to see what comes in 2023. And there's already people asking me to make predictions. The one monkey wrench that we really got to talk about is the overall state of the macroeconomic environment we find ourselves in, guys. You got to understand, and I've said this before in other videos that I'm working on right now that'll be uploaded to YouTube soon. If somebody can get 5 or 6% just parking their money in a money market account, if you think like an investor and not a collector, you're going to realize that, hey, I got $10,000 here. I was willing to buy this comic book. Then I realized that if I just park my money over here and take no risk, a year later, I'm going to have like almost an extra $600 deposited in that account just based on me having that initial $10,000 deposited. So that's very appealing to certain individuals because now we're in an environment where cash is no longer trash, guys. We have people that were coming into the antiques and collectibles trade because literally they could get loans for 2, 3, 3.5%, maybe at most 4%. Now these people are paying 6, 7, 8% for the same cost of borrowing this money. So a lot of these individuals, they're going to be more cautious over where they put it and where they deploy that capital going forward. That's a basic business truth. So 2023 has a lot of unknowns, thanks to the Fed, thanks to interest rates, thanks to the state of the economy. Are we in a recession? Are we not in a recession? Are we going to actually manage to land softly and not hit a recession? That I don't really believe, because I think the Fed and I think the government does want to trigger a recession because then it's going to be able to stabilize everything more quickly. So this is something that we got to look at. You know, where do we go from here? I really think that certain categories still have room to run. I'm going to be honest. If you're holding right now an Action Comics 1 or a Detective Comics 27 or an Alpha Edition Black Lotus or a first edition Charizard holofoil Pokemon card, or even a rocket-firing prototype Boba Fett action figure graded by AFA. Those particular items, again, they're top tier, they're investment grade. They have room to run still, amazingly, because the people that have the money to buy those particular items, most likely, they already have a diversified portfolio. So they're going to be protected better if we do hit a recession, if something happens to the overall economic system that causes people to pull back. Wealthy people are usually, not always, but usually more insulated than the average individual. And they're the people that are buying those particular items. I will tell you, there's most definitely going to be a pullback in the housing market because of what mortgage rates are at. You know, right now I am always actively in the real estate market. I do want to move to Collegeville. That is still on the plans for 2023 or possibly 2024. I currently reside in Boyertown, Pennsylvania, and I could tell you there's a lot of houses that were pretty much taken off the market simply because rates got too high and people wanted deals when they were trying to negotiate to buy those particular houses. You got to look at it this way, guys. If I go into the market and I want to buy a house, and let's say I pay $300,000 or $400,000 for that house, and I come in even with $100,000 to $200,000 down in cash, if somebody's financing $100,000 to $200,000 at 7 or 8%, that's $14,000 to $16,000 per year in interest alone. That is insane to pay that on a mortgage, given the fact that we just came from a rate environment where rates were only between 3 and 4%. So this is something that has to be looked at. There is a lot of things that are developing in the overall macroeconomic environment that are going to definitely affect the antiques and collectibles trade. And I have done videos in the past telling you guys that in most cases, antiques and collectibles are not a good short-term inflation hedge. Gold and silver over the short term, even cryptocurrency, they suck as inflation hedges. And I tell people that, and if they study history, if they understand how these markets work, they come to that same conclusion. So we are going to have more discussions on this coming up throughout the next couple of weeks and months. I am going to put a link to this particular article in the video description below. I just didn't think that you guys wanted to sit here while I read it to you when you can just quickly read it yourself. Thanks for watching. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below, and have a great evening or a good morning, because I'm recording this at 1:30 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. So I don't know if that's morning or evening. Early morning, maybe? Oh well. Have a good night, guys.